Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Interesting debate and some measure of agreement. And perhaps I'll start off by putting a slight olive branch out to Patrick Harvey. I think it's quite clear that crude oil has been vital for transport for the last 100 years, but I think it's equally clear that in well under the next 100 years we will have, because we will have had to, weaned ourselves off crude oil playing that particular role. But oil will remain of substantial commercial value. It will remain central to developed economies around the world, not, however, as a fuel for transport, but as a chemical feedstock. The progress that we've made in trying to replace crude oil as a chemical feedstock is substantially less than the progress we've made in replacing it in transport. And one of the challenges we have, I will do.
Patrick Harvey.
The member makes a very fair point. We have made a lot less progress, and we need to, in replacing hydrocarbons for all of these other uses. Is he really suggesting, though, that the already high prices that are being spent on extracting, the high costs incurred in extracting ever harder to reach oil, will be viable once fuel is no longer a legitimate use for those substances?
Stevenson.
Well, that will play out the way it plays out. My balance of view is that the price of oil will continue to rise, and we will continue to find that it is, for some time to come, the most economic solution to many of our needs. But we're going to have to divert investment into finding out how to replace oil as feedstock, but it will take a long time. Now, some things are going to happen technologically that will help all this, one of which is communications will improve. We'll have video conferencing via hologram that is essentially going to be just like sitting in the same room. We will travel less for fewer purposes. So, yes, we've got to reduce our consumption of non-renewable material, but we will find that the technology will help us do. Now, it isn't easy to look forward. Churchill said, and I don't think he was the first person to say it, prediction is difficult, especially about the future. We certainly know there will be a $100 barrel in the future. We certainly expect there will be a $200 barrel in the future, and we should not be surprised by a $300 barrel in the future. But there's nobody here can tell us when any of those will happen with any certainty. If I could work out when it was going to happen, I would end up a very wealthy man indeed. The uncertainty is not so much in the pricing, the uncertainty is in the timing. And that is precisely why, in what one might term the economically good times in the oil industry, we must store up the nuts to feed us through the bad times. That's what works. I mean, it's worth saying that Norway is a proportion of Norway's GDP that's down to the oil industry is more than 2.5 times the proportion of the Scottish economy. So very different, and yet the pain they're experiencing just now because they've stored away the nuts in an appropriate way that a squirrel will do to prepare for winter, and they're able to ride over the difficulties. Now, Michael McMahon quite properly highlighted the dangers of over-reliance on one industry, and indeed the first law of epigenetics is the more highly optimised an organism is for one environment, the more adversely it will be affected by change in that environment. So there is an intrinsic value in diversity rather than specialism, although specialism gives you great short-term benefits. Now, Michael spoilt it a bit by saying Norway's got no motorway system. He obviously hasn't been there. Yes, that's true, but they have the most wonderful ferry system, most wonderful network of regional airports that get people around that is related to the geography of Norway. And I know this very well because my niece stayed in Norway for many, many years. But the real legacy of oil is not actually this black stuff coming out of the ground. 50% of the value that we get from this industry is actually in exports. Not exports of the oil, but exports of skills, of talent. And the reservoir of skills that there is in our communities in Scotland and the north of England and beyond is very substantial indeed. The N56 report suggests Brazil will be spending £250 billion in this industry over the 4 years, 2013 to 2017. And indeed, Scottish Development International, in a report only this month, says that Scotland is widely admired around the world for its expertise. The Resilience Fund that we've heard about, well, it's about drawing the nuts that we put down in the good times. And the trouble is, Lewis McDonnell confirmed that oil would not be paying for the Resilience Fund when it's precisely the thing that should be. Now, Presiding Officer, I just declare my membership of the Institution of Engineering and Technology when I talk about engineers. We've got huge talent and skills, but we don't recognise these properly in a professional way. The Germans elevate engineers to a much higher social standing and give them much more academic support. We've probably got to do the same. Our engineers can develop oil elsewhere, offshore construction in wind and tidal, engineering projects generally, extraction of water increasingly going to be important. We have the skills, the talent. Half our industry is being drawn, the value of our industry is being drawn from offshore to onshore. It now lies in our people. We're going to make sure we support them. Presiding Officer.